Hello, I'm Eric Christensen, a senior meteorologist at the Tropical Analysis and Forecast Branch of the National Hurricane Center. This is a brief presentation outlining some changes we recently made to our offshore marine forecast zones for the Pacific coast of Mexico. The Pacific coast of Mexico is an active area for weather, with frequent hurricanes during the summer and fall. In addition, there are strong gap wind events in the Gulf of Tehuantepec in southern Mexico, primarily during the winter and spring. This is also an important area for global shipping, vital to the economy and security of the United States. For that reason, the National Hurricane Center started issuing offshore waters forecasts for the areas off Mexico in 2019. The original configuration had 10 zones from across the entire west coast of Mexico, but 3 of the offshore zones were too large to adequately describe the variety of weather mariners experience in these zones. They were zones 15, 23, and farther south, zone 27. These zones were divided further to provide more concise forecast wording. Zones 15 and 23 were split along 20 north. Zone 27 was split into 3 new areas. I'll go into each of these in detail. The colors on these charts represent wind speed climatology based on satellite data. The blue color represents high winds and the green color lower wind speeds. Zones 15 and 23 were divided into northern and southern sections along 20 north. This formed 2 new zones from zone 15, designated as zones 14 and 16. In previous configurations, there was occasionally a large gradient of wind speed and wave height between the coast of Baja California Sur and the Revillagigedo Islands of Socorro and Clarion. This occurs when a tropical cyclone moves across the southern part of the zone in summer and fall. In winter and spring, cold fronts move down the Baja California coast and often stall along the region. Strong winds and large swell are noted north of the front. Dividing the zone along 20 north results in smaller zones that better capture these differences. Similarly, dividing zone 23 along 20 north results in new zones designated as zone 22 and zone 24. Although not obvious in the wind speed climatology, which averages winds over multiple years and all seasons, zone 23 occasionally experiences a steep gradient in winds and seas, differentiating its northern and southern halves. This is also an area with distinct localized wind regimes, such as off Cabo Corrientes. Farther south, strong gap winds are common during the winter and spring over the Gulf of Tehuantepec, seen here, mainly due to cold fronts penetrating from the Gulf of Mexico across the Tehuantepec Isthmus into the Gulf of Tehuantepec. Winds to gale force are routine in this area, reaching storm or even hurricane force on occasion. Meanwhile, the winds and seas can be much lower close to the coastline on either side of the gap wind plume. Mariners often loiter in this area, waiting for favorable conditions to cross the Gulf of Tehuantepec. In its previous configuration, Zone 27 was too large to allow us to concisely describe the variety of conditions occurring across the zone during a gap wind event. The more favorable marine conditions on either side of the gap wind plume were sometimes poorly described or overlooked altogether. To improve this wording, we divided this large zone into 3 new zones: Zone 26, Zone 28, and Zone 29. Zone 26 extends from the Mexican state of Oaxaca, seen here, west of Puerto Angel. Farther west, Zone 29 extends off the Mexican state of Chiapas. Zone 28 is located in the middle of these two zones, off the state of Oaxaca, east of Puerto Angel. Gap winds are northerly near the coast, but veer more northeasterly farther offshore due to the Coriolis effect. Very large seas build beyond 90 nautical miles off the coast due to increased fetch. Confuse seas are common during the winter months as the shorter period northerly wind waves combine with longer period southerly swell, which is common in the winter. This configuration of Zone 28 accommodates the curving gap wind plume emanating out of the Gulf of Tehuantepec, as well as the higher seas in the outer waters. Together, these three zones better describe the variety of winds and seas in this area and provide mariners with details they need to make appropriate decisions about their transit across the Gulf of Tehuantepec region. The forecast from earlier today is a good example of the enhanced wording. A strong cold front moved through the Gulf of Mexico, supporting northerly gap winds to gale force over the Gulf of Tehuantepec. Note the gale warning in effect for Zone 28. In the zone in the middle, off the eastern portion of the Mexican state of Oaxaca. This is where the bulk of gale force winds and very rough seas are located. Mariners attempting to cross the Gulf of Tehuantepec now have more information to plan their crossing safely. The areas off Chiapas and western Oaxaca offer relative benign areas for mariners who wish to wait for conditions to improve over the Gulf of Tehuantepec. For more information on these changes, please contact Dr. Chris Lancy, Branch Chief of the Tropical Analysis and Forecast Branch of the National Hurricane Center.